person.
Wow, I'm so happy. Okay, I'll just watch from behind, and then I'll connect at 10. So I'm so sorry I was early. I just didn't want to make it.
No problem. But what has happened, Gabriela, is Jimena has not come in for that mediator experiences, that JAMS fellowship experience. She hasn't been able to finish. We'll do that, Jimena, at the end of your session. We'll fix up a time for that. So we'll get Gabriela in. She's like doesn't have too much time. She's also one of the half-an-hour session situations. So Gabriela, thank you very much.
Jimena, we have to catch up.
Yes, of course. And Vikram, it's fantastic to finally meet you. I've heard so much about you, and I'm so sorry. I'm like really bad with social media, and I never get into LinkedIn, and I never. You need to write me on WhatsApp. Everybody who knows me knows that that's the only way to actually reach me.
Okay, we'll do that.
Yeah, but thank you so much for this, and I'll see you soon. And Gabi, I'm so happy to see you. I love you. I'll see you soon. Bye.
Gabi is too busy a woman now. She also doesn't have time. That's
I bet.
Yeah, that's part of life.
That's good. Yeah, that's good. And she's busy doing good. That's wonderful.
But you know that she's shifted. She's moved to Switzerland now.
Oh, I didn't know that. Gabi, you're not in Brazil anymore?
No.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm in Geneva. So.
Oh my God! Wow. What are you doing there?
I work for the ILO, the International Labor Organization.
International
Labor Organization.
Okay. Wow. Wonderful. And are you doing mediation with them?
Yes.
Wow. Oh my God. Congratulations. Okay. We'll catch up. I'll let you guys do.
This is nice. The session started with catching up happening. So, Gabriela, as always.
My pleasure.
It's been
always my pleasure. And now Jimena will be the next one to talk to you over and over and never, you know.
Yeah, because you're not there to do that. Huh? You're too busy to do that. So anyway, Gabriela, obviously, always a pleasure, and we haven't seen you for some time. But okay, we haven't really had the language and mediation you didn't participate in, I think.
No.
Yeah. Okay, so we need your interaction. But now it is what we're doing today. Let me just put it up, and then we'll go straight into your session. Okay. This is what we are doing. Mediation legislation, the how, what, when, where, which, who, why of it. And of course, Gabriela will tell us a little bit about herself. And let's just move straight to the topic. I won't even talk about going to mediatorvikram.com because there's no time for that. So please, Gabriela, all yours.
And because that goes without saying. So I really believe in the need for law in some cultures. There were many discussions in Brazil at the time. I was one of the first people in the mediation field in Brazil. I mean, one of the first many, not that I was the only one at all, but I was certainly one of the pioneers. And at that time, mediation was completely unknown, and people used to mix it with arbitration. And it sounds like a joke, but it's not. That many people also got confused with meditation. And that was not the worst, because the worst was when it started to be confused with conciliation, which in Brazil, in the specific cultural, structural context, was a process offered by the judiciary just to resolve the problems of the judiciary and not of the people. So it was a cheap process for cheap procedures. And of course, the results were, that goes without saying too. So when people started to understand what mediation was, there was all this limbo of bad experiences, poor experiences, and all the mediation fans and practitioners and people that had experienced good mediation processes felt that it was harder to explain what it was after people had a feeling that they knew what it was, but it was not mediation that they knew, it was conciliation poorly performed. And so the discussions about the law started. And I participated throughout the whole process. And I was invited to be a co-author of one of the draft laws. I say one because afterwards there were 3 draft laws that were put together. It became like a Frankenstein. And I was very concerned because the way it looked at the first Congress House. So it was first discussed in the Senate, and then it went to the House itself, where it finally became a law. But there was a prior draft law that had been in Congress since 1998, but didn't go very far. It was just going from one drawer to another, and nothing happened. And then at this point, when I was invited to be the co-author of one of the draft laws, it was getting more traction because of many, many reasons, including the complete, how can I say, the complete chaos in which the judiciary was. I remember one time I was in a fellows program where I met Jimena, but at that time she was not there. It was 2015. Yeah, 15. Yeah, maybe beginning of 15. And the draft laws were actually, they became laws in 2015 at the end of the year, and they started to be effective as of 16. But anyway, beginning of 15, I go to San Francisco with a group of fellows from many places, and one great mediator from India, who you know very well. She was there too, and we were all supposed to talk about the progresses of mediation in our countries. And Laila was just before me, and I remember clearly that she said that India really needed mediation because there were 32 million pending cases at the time. And I was the next one to talk, and I didn't know if I should cry or laugh because Brazil is 5 times smaller than India in terms of population. And at that time, Brazil, with 200 million inhabitants, had 108 million pending cases.
Wow.
So that meant that every Brazilian was in court, and some many times. So it is completely unsustainable. But as of that moment, the system was demanding review. And mediation was a first step into this new line of understanding of courts. And it's not like I am a big fan of courts per se, or even mediation in court, but I do believe that what mediation did that was really important was to open the minds and hearts so that people would understand that there are other ways. And the law had a very big impact, not exactly in the quality of mediation, because what made the biggest difference, we had the law to which I was a co-author that was enacted in 2015, became effective on 16. But the most important was the inclusion of the possibility of mediation in the Civil Procedure Code. Because of that provision, the courts in Brazil, throughout the whole big country, were obliged to create a space for alternative dispute resolution systems inside the court. So instead of the concept as court annex, like in the United States and other countries, it was inside the court. I was not in favor of it at all, because I always thought that mediation is something from society to society, and the role of the courts is to motivate society to use mediation before going to court. That is in the ideal world, or in the countries where it is really expensive to start a proceeding. And in Brazil, it's not expensive to start. It's like very, very expensive to conclude, because once you start, the sunk cost is so much that you just keep going and trying to make good use of the money that is already sunk. So then you just sunk in more money and time and energy and relationships, etc. But anyway, the most important aspect of having a law, independently of the quality of the law, and I could talk for hours about what I find important to be in the law or not, and so on. But the most important is that it made lawyers be obliged to at least understand what it is. And by having them obliged to understand what it is, they had to get some information. And the most clever ones were fast enough to find another way of negotiating their contracts with clients. So they very fast understood that it was much better to sell results than to sell work. Because when you charge a lot for 10 years, 20 years of court work, you're charging just for the work, not for results, not for any benefit to your client. But when you charge to be an advocate in a mediation setting, you are committed to finding the best solution to your client as fast as possible. So that completely changes the mindset of lawyers. And in my humble view, this is the biggest benefit of having a law. And now we can discuss for sure for ages about how to make a law as good as it gets, how to promote quality, how to really enhance the experience of the parties, and the peace building aspects of mediation in relation to a law. And if I could summarize in a very, very small nutshell, I really believe that the law does anything. The law doesn't do anything. It is the people that the more educated they get, the more they put pressure on their lawyers to work for them and not for themselves, to work for the benefit of what really matters to the client and not just what really matters to the law. So then it accelerates a lot the transformation of the legal field, because lawyers need to understand what the client really needs and wants. And that is normally very, very far away from whatever the law can regulate. So then we open up the horizon for all the legal field. And what the law did, after all, was just to make it mandatory to search for more education and for new ways of resolving old problems. And I would love to hear from you.
Well, look, first of all, since Leila said 32 million, we've reached 50 million now. So things haven't come down. So, and we've had the law. We've had the law in our civil procedure code since 2005. It was actually active. It was actually introduced much earlier. There was a whole thing of interpretation and all. Finally, Supreme Court. Today we are functioning on a judgment of the Supreme Court, which said that law is not drafted well. So that civil procedure code is actually being run through the judgment of the Supreme Court. So that's another thing. But the important thing, look, Gabriela, what we have to look at is for a country like yours, and of course, a country 4-5 times in terms of population, from a process which is actually disconnected from lawyers. Can we do that? Can mediation be looked at as a process where you are not looking at going to a lawyer and coming into mediation? Can that be a structure? And that is where legislation will come in. How simple should it be? Whatever. Because I'm looking at it developing where a lot of people actually can't go to a lawyer, and if they do, they're going to be stuck in that litigation. They're going to be taken through litigation. The culture of how lawyers will run their profession, that culture, I don't know how we can change that, whether that's going to change or not. So we'll have to assume for the moment that they're going to be lawyers, which should not have been like that, but they're going to be lawyers. So how do you look at that development of mediation as something which is totally standalone? It is not connected to courts or lawyers, and legislation in relation to that, if you think that's a good approach?
I think, to be super honest, that ideal is ideal, but humankind is not prepared yet. Humankind still needs to know where the boundaries are, where the frontiers are, and that comes with the law. And when you are really involved in a conflict, neurologically, you cannot think of collaborative ways out of the conflict alone, because you have done your part, you have done your best, and your brain is working through the less sophisticated part of it, reptilianly. And at this point, you cannot think in a complex and collaborative way. So you need the law to say, this is the frontier. If you want something better than this, you need to negotiate. And then you go for mediation, you go for a collaborative lawyer, but you will need a lawyer, because plan B is what makes plan A realistic. Without plan B, plan A is too soft and too fluid, and people just don't see a benefit in really diving into a negotiation process that will, of course, require commitments from them, because they sincerely believe that they have all the rights and that the other one is completely wrong. And if they believe so, there is nothing else to bring them back to the table other than the imminence of losing whatever they believe they are entitled to. So in a very practical way, I think that what makes people go to mediation really voluntarily is the imminence of a procedure in court. So it's a kind of a labyrinth, but it's really hard to find a way out.
Because the way I was looking at it is, if we could develop it in a way where, yes, you want to bring in a lawyer, okay, maybe at some point when certain things are required, yes. But if we start with that kind of a connection with which mediation has, JP was there before that, he's of course totally entrenched in it, he's a litigating lawyer. So for that concept, that where it's connected so closely with the court system, that is it good for the way it, for the future? Right now, yes, backlog, but for the future, is that a good connection to have? I just think, because I just feel that somewhere you have to develop a culture. Will the culture ever develop if this is the connection?
Yeah, the ideal is not to have to go to court, is not to have to use the court as the frontier you don't want to cross, for sure. But how do you make people move in a collaborative way when they really see that there is no way out? How do you make them at least try something collaborative? Unavoidably, you have to put a limit to their ability to postpone, understanding that the other one also has some rights. And that, again, you need a law. So I like very much the models of Argentina and Italy. These are two models that I know a little more, besides the Brazilian one. And actually what goes spread out in the United States with different state laws, etc. But the principle is always to make the cost of going to court too high, to make the risk too high, so that people understand on a very basic equation that they need to try to avoid it. And then they look for mediation, and then they accept to negotiate, and then they lower their heads because they know that if they go to court, they are already losing a lot. But it needs to become conscient. So they need some help from outside. I like to say that the methodology of conflict resolution needs to be decided either before or outside the conflict. It needs to be prior or external to the parties in conflict. So that will come either from a contract clause, a mediation clause that is mandatory. And I like very much to compare with the situation of arbitration in Brazil. And I know we have very few minutes, but I would just summarize it. But not without saying the other option first. So either you need to have a contract previewing that in case of conflict, you have to try mediation. And of course, with the penalties if you don't. Or you need to have someone outside, the judge, the lawyer, the mother, someone influential enough to make you at least try mediation. Of course, mediation itself can never be mandatory, but the need to go is what matters. And then once you are there, most people at least try to do something out of it. And then what a surprise, they do something great. So this is what I really believe that humankind still needs. But so coming back to the first comparison, Brazil had an arbitration law since 1824, but it was unknown, unheard of, because although there was the possibility, in order to have arbitration, you could have a contract clause, but you needed to confirm it after the conflict was concrete. So that didn't happen. Then what Brazil did in 1996, and it also took 10 years until the Supreme Court to confirm the law, was that the only thing they did, and the Brazilian arbitration law is really good, they made the contract provision mandatory by itself, self-sufficient. So if you foresee arbitration in a contract, you cannot go to court. And then it became very effective, very used, very well succeeded. So I really believe in the only thing that must be mandatory is go and listen. If you go and you listen, then you have a choice. Before, you don't have a choice.
So basically you want people in some way to be sitting down together, at least that first instance where they can actually, at least that, okay, this is not an ego issue. You have to do this because it's mandated by law. So that's why you're sitting there, but you can always walk out. The problem that has happened, Gabriela, with that is that the interpretation of you must try mediation has gone into absurd interpretations by court, whether you went into it within good faith or not, whether this was a reasonable proposal you did not accept. These kind of judgments are coming out on that because the court is going to be a court. For some reason, they just can't understand that their interference is not required. So those are the issues that come up after that. So because definitely, like you're saying, maybe it's a good idea. I mean, that part of it, I don't know whether it's been good for mediation as such, because in the court system in India, of course, it's been practiced for the last 18 years. And that is when our civil procedure code was actually finally implemented. So 18 years, it has made no difference. It has made no difference. There is it's not, there's no culture developing or anything. Only thing is the bad experiences coming out, because again, JP was right there before you. It's become settlement. It's just becoming a settlement thing. It's not mediation. Like you and me, looks at mediation from the human touch, the humanistic approach. He's looking at the mediation from that aspect of it. And he's not happy with what's happening, definitely, with this whole settlement thing. So that's where the issue lies, that are we really moving in the right direction, or are we just using it for the benefit of the court system because they're overloaded? So that's why they need a release. I don't know how you look at it.
I think that many times we are very tempted to confuse the problems of the use with the problems of the abuse. So one thing is the use of mediation by the courts and how they can make it minimally minimum quality assurance, etc., and all the problems that come with the pasteurizing something that is completely unique in each time. So you cannot expect to put mediation on a formula and always get the same result, of course. So mediation is an art. So the mediator is an artist, and each mediation and each mediator will bring in completely different pros and cons to the situation, unavoidably. And when you take it to court, you need to pasteurize it, so it loses a lot of flavor, a lot of vitamins. That's part of it. But the abuse, meaning using it for the wrong purposes, you doing it based on completely volunteer labor, which should be a crime because it's slavery, and things like that. This is really the abuse, not the use. The use has problems, yes. They compensate, in my view, yes. But the abuse never compensates. But then we cannot resolve the problem of the hurt nail by cutting the finger. So.
But Gabriela, now we have to, of course, okay, you said court part of it, civil procedure court. For a moment, of course, there'll be a debatable thing, but let it exist there. What about outside the court system, what we call private mediation? What is the legislation that you would want to see there?
Then I think it should be minimum, just guaranteeing confidentiality and maybe having some kind of sector ombudsman where people could eventually bring in the ask for help in case of bad professionals, because that happens anywhere. And people should not be subject to it. There is a lot of confusion. There's a lot of mediators who don't know what they're doing, and they can cause bigger problems to the parties. So that also is a need. The only remedy that has no counterindication to that, in my humble view, is an educated society and a real mechanism of market-based clientele. So if clients are sophisticated enough to know how mediation should look like, they just won't go to the bad mediators, or they won't go back in case of a bad experience, or they will badmouth the bad professional. That would be ideal again, but it never starts like that. At the beginning, people are very confused about what mediation should look like, and many times they become subject to bad professionals, and that should be avoided.
So, of course, Gabriela, 30 minutes was never going to be enough, but
we know it, right? But that's the point.
But of course, okay, on the 19th, if you get time, please drop in. Chinmay is here, so let's get Chinmay in. And of course, one aspect that, of course, JP was also pointing out, he thinks that it should be funded by the state. It's an activity which is something which is it's just like the human aspect of it is the more important part. So someone else should fund it. Corporates should fund the whole activity. So that's another thought process we have to look at, we have to discuss. So we'll take it up.
2 hours for this topic.
Yeah, easy, yeah. But 19th, please, 19th, drop in for one of those sessions. And I'm sure now you're experiencing good weather. So things are getting better now.
Much better.
Now this is a good time for you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So Chinwe is here. Let's get her in. So thank you very much, Gabriela. Always a
Wonderful.
pleasure, but that aspect is not happening too much. You not have, you don't have to be so busy. Yes, we have to do good things in ILO, but you have to do good things for the mediation world also. We need you here also.
Always. Things go together.
Well, yeah, what I did tell you that there is the new show. This is called Magic in Mediation, which I've started. So you have to participate in that. I mean, your session has to be recorded for that.
June, I'm going to Hogwarts, so I'll bring in my magic wand.
Wow. Okay, thank you. See you. So